Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Unlimited. Today, we are talking about calling out the BS in online business. There is a lot of noise in the online business world, a lot of shoulds, a lot of how-tos that end up becoming shoulds, a lot of magic pills and solutions that don't actually work for everybody because they are not for everybody. They are for the person who created them. So I have invited Sam Munoz and Karyn Paige of Making Website Magic and Sam Munoz Consulting to join me to have this conversation because that is a big part of what they're all about. If you follow them in the online space, calling out some of those things that just aren't truisms, but are stated like they are. Sam is the CEO of Sam Munoz Consulting, a WordPress development and education company, and Karyn is a web developer and mentor on the team. They are teachers of web design, development, and tech. SMC empowers women to step boldly into business, listen to their intuition, and claim the success they are worthy of. Together, they co-host the Making Website Magic podcast, a podcast specifically for women web designers. SMC values minimalist business strategies, productivity through alignment, and simplified, effective web design. Some of what we talk about are unpacking the shoulds that block innovation, stepping out of fear-based decision-making and into aligned decision-making, understanding who you are and what you actually want to create before trying to find or build a strategy to create said business, blending strategy and creativity to create a framework that supports a choose-your-own adventure, the importance of the inner work, deprogramming the corporate ladder mentality, and allowing space for discernment in order to grow and change as needed. Sam and I were in a mastermind together for several years, and we learned a lot from each other as we evolved and got to know ourselves and our businesses better. We had a great deal of conversations around finding that alignment between who we are, what we do, and how we do it. I've also learned a great deal about websites and the journey of websites from her. I love the podcast that she's created with Karyn, and I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. So without further ado, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Valerie Friedlander, Certified Life Business Alignment Coach, and this is Unlimited. This podcast bridges the individual and the societal, scientific and spiritual, positive and negative, nerdy and no, there's just a lot of nerdy. Come on board and let's unlock a life that's as badass as you are. Welcome, Sam and Karyn. I'm so excited to have you on the Unlimited podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
I've been looking forward to this interview because Sam, you and I have known each other for a while now. And have always loved the work that you do with websites and design. And you have taken what you've learned and turned it into some amazing work, not just in the techie space, but also in disrupting patterns. And I'm so excited to talk about all the things. Before we dig in, I'd love for each of you to share a little bit about you and what brought you to where you are today.
Sure. Okay. I will go first. Is that good, Karyn? Sound good
Yep.
to you? Awesome. So, quick backstory, right? First, I was born 1992. I'm just kidding.
Give me a timeline of your life history.
Yes, exactly. No, I studied engineering in college. I think that's where I'd like to start. Studied engineering in college, had this grand plan of becoming like a robotics engineer, started doing that kind of stuff, and then quickly moved around the country as a military family, had my daughter, all sorts of lifey things happened, which eventually brought me to this kind of pivotal moment where I was like, I can either continue these kind of random jobs as a software developer and as these all these different things, or I can take all these skills and I can find freedom in my own life and start my own business. And I'd already kind of been in the entrepreneurial space. I had a blog about children's books, which really brought me into on the online world. And I think that that's where we met, Valerie, was in a Facebook group when I was doing Addison Reads. And I had, done all these things with websites for the blog and all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to quit this job that I had and I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to start selling web development services. And that was 2018 in January. And I really have not looked back since. And things have changed and shifted and molded over time. My life looks completely different than it did, personally back then. But I feel so free and so amazing. And it's just continued to grow. And I had the pleasure of welcoming Karyn onto the team officially as a huge part of the company last year. So I will let her share about her journey, but it has been a pleasure to have someone else on this ride with me.
Yay. I love that. I'm smiling so big right now. Okay. So for me, I quite literally fell into web design right around the age of 30. I kind of hit that Saturn returns. What am I doing with my life? Kind of rite of passage, so to speak. And I was like, I think I'm going to do WordPress web design because I already have a WordPress website. So that's enough to pursue this as a profession. And prior to that, I had basically spent my entire 20s working in admin jobs and temp jobs by day, and then singing in nightclubs and wedding bands and, being a backup singer by night and burning the candle at both ends and kind of feeling like at a certain point, what is this all leading to? If I'm not going to go to LA or try to be on American Idol, why am I singing in dive bars for $100 a night? And they're all sweaty and they smell like beer, all these literally cash money. Right. So so then I started tinkering with web design, and right around that time, my husband and I relocated from California to Washington State. And so I basically was a trailing spouse, quit my job, was trying to start this business with no network, no idea of what was required to actually run a business. And then I started consuming all the content and all the things and following all the biz coaches and learning all of these strategies, but feeling really frustrated because none of it was working for me. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not finding the success that I see on Instagram all the time? And just by happenstance, Sam was looking for a contractor to help out. And so I joined in that capacity. And then about a year later, I was invited to join the team officially. And now we're here, and it's expanded into making website magic and all these really cool opportunities and adventures. And here we are.
So cool. I've loved watching Sam's journey and then having you come on and the two of you putting together this amazing podcast where you're tackling all of those norms, all of the, the Instagram success that is this curated facade over what does real life look like and how do we actually do the things versus just look like we're doing the things. But also, I too have a background doing lots of admin jobs and being in California and trying to decide if I was going to go after the agent and do all the stuff in the theater world and all of that, plus focusing in my energy in a male-dominated space, which for me was the construction industry. So a lot of what you talk about, both of you, comes into that whole navigating these male-dominated spaces and then how that dynamic has infused into what we see in the online entrepreneur space and how people are like, okay, I learned how to play the game really well in these business spaces, which are also very male dominated. And now I'm going to teach you how to do it in this very pyramid schemey kind of way. Not to say that everyone is like that, but there's really a very big energy about that. And I would love for you all to share a little bit about what that's looked like for you coming from the techie space into this online entrepreneur space and some of the parallels that you've seen in the way people show up to it, like some of those patterns?
That is such a deep question.
I ask those.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's got me thinking. I think, and I hope that this kind of gets us moving in the right direction of answering your question. So we're just going to start here. I think one of the biggest things that Karyn and I have observed as we've been putting together our podcast and putting together our mentorship for women web designers is that there's a lot of, you should be doing this. And I think that that does come from a very male / stratification centered type of teaching and coaching, mentorship, whatever you want to call it, but where you're following some sort of leader and they're telling you what you should do and how you should do things. And this is the only way. And I think that what ends up happening is that it's super limiting, right? So it's definitely not unlimited. And it also, it doesn't create a lot of expansive opportunities. And so if you're not doing it this one way, you're doing it wrong. And because you're doing it wrong, you're not going to be successful. It's a big problem that we're all forced into this one box, when in reality, if we all did our own ways of doing things, we'd probably be more successful. We'd feel more in alignment. We'd be moving in the direction of a business that's more in tune with what we want versus just assuming what other people want. And I do think that that comes, whether it's from male dominated spaces or not, it comes from certain people in power telling us what is the right thing and the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. That's my perspective.
And to add to that, what we're really talking about and thinking about a lot is this idea that when someone is telling you what you should do and that their way is the right way to do things, and you really can't deviate from that, it doesn't allow you to think for yourself and to imagine and innovate what could be possible. And it also doesn't leave a lot of space for who you are as a person and what you might naturally be inclined for, or what you're interested in, or your personal goals are for your own life, and how that advice fits into that. Like, I'm a really big nerd for like personality tests and self-awareness and self-discovery and just understanding who we are as individuals and what makes us tick. And for me, a lot of the advice that we were hearing in the online space didn't align with me as a person. Like, I'm an introvert and I'm very comfortable just like living in my own space. So you're telling me that I need to like show up and do all of these things and get a lot of people to pay attention to me and all of this stuff in order to make sales. It felt very contradictory to anything that felt natural or good for me. So that was a big part of it, is when you really start thinking for yourself and also questioning, well, why is it that way? Why are you telling me that's the thing I should do? Then you can start to unpack whether or not it really even makes sense for you. And so recently I've started to really question, or like be aware of when I even use the word should when I'm talking to people. Like, maybe I kind of want to remove that from my vocabulary.
Yeah, it's hard to remove from your vocabulary. It's been a big work for me paying attention to it. Like, even growing up with a parent who my mom used to say, stop shitting all over yourself. And even like that awareness didn't quite translate into, okay, well, what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean to should on myself? And noticing. I mean, it starts with noticing. We were talking about before we started recording that idea of once you see it, you can't unsee it. And there's a saying that once you identify a limiting belief, it has an expiration date, that when you see the pattern, then you're like, oh, and you start to notice where it's showing up. I would love to explore a little bit about the idea in these spaces where it's like there is one right way to do it. And especially because you're working in the strategic kind of space, like how-tos. We always think of how-tos as being very prescriptive, right? Like how to do this. You do step 1 and step 2 and step 2, and all of that. And yet you're also working in a very creative space. What does it look like to bring those together as far as being able to teach someone how to do something while allowing them the space to be creative and make decisions?
That's a great question. What comes to mind for me is I find it really helpful to understand that there might be like a general framework, and then it's up to you on how you want to implement that framework, right? So like in our space, we are one-to-one service providers, like as web designers, right? So a good place to start, a very helpful and tried and true place to start is, why don't you go talk to people and let them know what you do? How you choose to do that, like implement that, is totally up to you. Here's some good ideas or maybe some best practices, but in no way am I going to say the only way for you to do this is to have this context, this conversation, use these words. Here's a script. If you deviate from that script, you're going to mess up. Like there's no fear based in there. It's all choose your own adventure. It's all your own choice. But it also comes from this understanding that there are some commonalities in ways of doing things. Sam knows this about me. Like I love looking at a few examples and then being able to determine what is the thing about these like discovery calls, or what is the thing about websites that they all have in common that all lead to like the end result or the effect you're trying to get. Okay, it's 5 things, or it's things in this order. Okay, great. That's very helpful to know. And then it becomes this framework. And again, it's just like, hey, that's just the foundational essence, but what you choose to build around that framework is all up to you. Like, what do you think? What feels good to you?
I also like to think of the analogy of math, because there's a direction that we're all going in, right? To try to get this answer, but there's 1,000 different ways to get there. And there's steps that you can follow with these different paths. Sometimes you can use derivatives, sometimes you can use integrals, whatever, but you're going to get to the answer. And there's not always one way to do it. And you get to decide based off of your experience, based off of what you feel most comfortable with, whatever, which way you want to go to get the answer to the problem. And that's math, right? That's as basic as you can possibly get. And then you take that and bring it to the real world, and there's even more options. And so definitely the way that we like to lead is very much like Karyn said, here's a framework. Here is kind of the overarching thing you're trying to do and a way to get there, but you get to decide how you actualize that, right? And that's why it's so important to think as yourself, where am I trying to go, instead of where is someone else telling me that I need to be going, with the whole should thing, right? Because if you don't know where you want to go, then how are you supposed to get there, but also how are you supposed to discern for yourself, I should take this path or this path? And I think it all comes from within. I mean, I'm sure you hear me, Valerie, like it comes from within, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you helped me really look at in the idea of the website is knowing, well, what do you want it to do? What's the purpose of this? And I'm like, well, I do this in so many areas. And it's funny how you can take something from one area of your life and be like, this totally makes sense. But then there's another area where maybe it's been bogged down with shoulding. It's covered in should. And you don't realize that you're doing something, like you have something that works here. You know what the purpose is. Well, what if you applied that over here and said, well, what do you want the experience to be like for somebody getting to know you? Well, that's what your website is. It's a place for somebody to get to know you. What's the journey you're helping them go on? What's the purpose of this space? And I know what you're focused on right now is people who are building a business in building sites. But I think you see a lot of parallels, right? The patterns again, with like people looking to build a business, people who are looking to build a site. What are some of the, I don't necessarily want to say lies, but some of the stories that have been built up around that experience that you would really like people to know are stories and not like truth with a capital T?
I'd love to start with this idea. This is like the overarching idea that you have to know what your business model is before you start applying things that you hear to your website, to your marketing, to all aspects of your business. And so I'll make that very tangible. So for example, if you are a service provider, you're a coach, you are someone who has interactions with your clients in a one-on-one way where working with them directly, creating something like an email list, which is what a lot of us are told to do. That is a story that is constantly being perpetuated in the online space, is you have to have an email list. And therefore your website has to have an opt-in page, right? And that's like the main thing that you want on your website is you want this great opt-in form. That's the first thing you want people to see and click on. That doesn't even align with your business model. Why do you need to be speaking with people in a one-to-many way, right? In a way where you're just like sending out these impersonal emails, when at the end of the day, you're trying to create a business that has one-on-one connection. Why aren't you starting there? And so I think that that's one of the biggest lies/stories, is that one size fits all approach to business. And because one person did it that particular way, going back to what we said before, then that means that everybody has to do it that way. And if they're not, then they're missing out. How many times have you scrolled on Instagram and seen an advertisement that says, grow your email list to 200,000 people and make $1 million? Like that kind of stuff irks me. And then it goes back to every facet of your business, to your website, the way that you market yourself, the way that you show up in social groups. If you don't know what your business model is, you don't really know how to apply it. But then again, like even if you know what your business model is, you might succumb to these ideas, right? I have to do it this way. And if I don't, I must be missing something. And then you get bogged down by just all these pieces. So that I would say is one of the biggest ones.
That reminds me of what Karyn said earlier, was about that whole, like, what's wrong with me that this isn't working? And I have a journal that's full of what's wrong with me, not related to business, but like before that, where it's just like, what's wrong with me? Why are the things not working? And it's like, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's something that you've internalized that's not actually yours. And maybe there's another way to do it. So yeah.
It's so funny because Sam literally read my mind. I was like, email list in my mind. It kept like going off like a neon sign, right? So I 100% agree that not understanding your business model enough to make decisions that make sense for your business model, and therefore allowing a lot of outside input to influence what you're doing, that's huge. Also, something that always stands out to me is when you start to build your business from the outside in instead of building it from the inside out, right? And so we hear a lot of these online business owners who get stuck at a certain point where they're like, I don't know what to post on social media. I don't know where to find clients. I don't know what my branding is. And so you kind of get stuck in these places in the I don't know dialogue because the inner work hasn't been done yet. Like that foundational work hasn't been done yet, where you are thinking about, well, what is my business about? Why am I starting this? What are my values? What is my mission? What is it about me that is unique in this space of many providers who do similar things? When I'm just talking to people, talking to clients that I may have worked with, what are their needs? What is speaking to them? What are their goals? And how can I use my skills to help them? All of a sudden, when you do that inner work, those I don't knows become very clear, and it kind of makes sense. And so you might find that, oh, your branding is really easy to figure out because you know that you want people to feel this certain way when they work with you. And so maybe like these colors would go best with that. Or you might realize, hey, nobody cares if you're using Railway or Montserrat or Playfair Display. They just want to know that you can give them results.
They just want to read it.
Yeah. So maybe I don't need to spend all of this time on all this other stuff and which email service provider is going to be best for me or which platform is going to be best for me, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, just start from the inside and build out.
I could not have said it better myself.
I did want to say something else about what Karyn just said. And it's that process and that work of doing it from the inside out is really hard. And it takes a long time to figure that kind of stuff out, and having support doing that work is really helpful. Valerie and we've been in that mastermind, and obviously we don't do that anymore. But I know that when we were in the mastermind together, so many times we had deeper conversations about like the inner parts of our business and the inner parts of ourselves. And I do think like having a life coach or having some sort of coaching support or therapy or something like that, that helps you truly dig into yourself so that you can show up and do that work in the long term too, right? Not just until tomorrow, but like you're building a business with good foundations and longevity really does require having some level of support in that way. So I wanted to throw that out there to anyone listening, that that is an important aspect of doing that inner work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I mean, of course I say absolutely, right? Like, no, but it's the idea of being able to see and break patterns, having a community like what you all are offering with your students, to be able to see outside the one, like I call it the committee in your head, where you tend to either things go to die, right? You have an idea and you're like, oh, but I don't see the validation or the other people doing it. And the committee starts like, what do you think you're doing? I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, blah. So anything to take you outside of the committee in your head, but also not having just people who are going to say yes or do it this way, but people who are going to help you discern. I actually just talked about this in a previous episode, like the idea of having people at the table, like who's at your table, who's helping you see things from different viewpoints, who's helping you think about things from different ways. That's not just the way that you always see it or have always seen it, and who's getting you outside of your own stinking thinking. Or this stuff that you've internalized that isn't helpful. And a lot of times people come in from these spaces that we all come from, and we've picked up on these stories about who's right and who knows best. Daddy knows best, and the power dynamics of that. And it's very hard not to come right back in. Like if you're starting your own business, like Sam, you were talking about, and I've done the same thing of going from, okay, I work in this space and now I'm going to do my own thing because I want freedom. But I carried all of that stuff with me, all of those belief systems. I didn't unpack them. I just brought them with me. And then I went and was like, okay, who tells me the right way? Because there's a right way, because I learned that there's a right way. There's a way to succeed. You climb the ladder. It's very obvious. You put one foot on this rung and then this rung and then this rung. And that is not the case. And I love how y'all are expressing that it's not a ladder. It's like one of those, the labyrinth that you walk, start from the inside and slowly walk out and realize it evolves. And I would love for you to share a little bit about that evolution for you in your business. I mean, the awareness of it being something that you can create, but how you evolving has led your business to evolve, and what that's looked like.
So I definitely, I hear you, Valerie, because I know, especially coming from a traditional job type setting where I didn't even think about it that way until you said it, about like just looking for that validation, looking for someone to say this is the right way. If you're coming from a place where you always have a boss telling you what to do, coming in and then now having the opportunity to do literally anything, scary. But I think one thing that's been really eye-opening for me is just continuing to allow myself to refine as I go, to try something and then to check back in and say, how did that make me feel? Did I enjoy it? What is the outcome? What was the value? What was the ROI? Like, I like to think about it from a data perspective, but then also from a mindset perspective too. And basically being okay with the idea of letting things go as needed to move me in a direction that feels better, and to move the company as a whole in a direction that feels like we're going in a space that we want to. And I think that that's a part of decision making in and of itself, right? Is the ability to not only decide, but to look critically and to allow yourself to explore the idea of making a change. And so I think that that's probably the biggest thing that we've continued to do. So just continuing to check in on our mission and pulling everything, as Karyn said, pulling everything from the inside. What are our values? What are our mission statement? All of these things. Where do we want to go? Why do we want to make this amount of money? Why do we not want to make this amount of money? And deciding from the inside. And that has been huge.
Yeah, it really, really has. It's so much easier or more easeful and I don't want to even use the word comfortable, but like soothing almost in a way when you're like reflecting back. That's a huge thing that we do at Samantha Munoz Consulting is reflection, documenting like what went great this week, what went great this month, and then actually like looking back on that. So it's like this journaling, this evolving journaling process in the business that's really helpful for making those connections between what's working, what's not. And also just what's true in business is true in life, right? So if we're evolving as people, it's natural that the business is going to evolve. And then you periodically, you check back in and say, hey, how is this still in alignment with the vision, the values, the mission, et cetera. And all of a sudden, like decisions for moving forward become so much easier because you're using that inner work as like your guiding light and as your touch point for, is this a yes or a no? Like I'm human design, I'm a generator. So I'm like, is it a yes or is it a no? Like all of those decisions become so much easier. But for me, I think that even understanding that there is this concept of alignment was so helpful. And is this in alignment or out of alignment? Is this something that's frustrating me or something that feels good that I want to respond to? Was very, very helpful and cleared a lot of things up really quickly.
I love it. Yeah. And exactly what you were saying about that idea of like going out and the sky's the limit. I talk about that, like that in and of itself can be overwhelming. At the same time, it means that you can create whatever. And the idea of giving yourself space to discern that and check in and make different choices is huge. So I love all of that. Now, for each of you, what does it mean to you to be unlimited?
For me, I feel like it's just this idea that you get to decide, right? Like you get to decide what's right for you. And there are a lot of options. So part of it is feeling like the horizon is very vast and feeling like excited about that, but also knowing that all you really need is just like a little piece of that sky's the limit. Because it's expanding and everybody has their own like little sliver or their own little lane, right? So it's like, it's this both and of like anything is possible. And I just need like only a little bit of it to feel good. And anything else is just like, negotiable, or so to speak, right? It's like, hey, if it feels good and it's not hurting anybody else and it's satisfying your goals and desires, go for it.
I think that's how I see that unlimitedness as well, because I think the key for me is realizing that no matter how big or how small my dreams might be, they're my dreams. And so it doesn't really matter. And so knowing like one of the things that I want is to just be able to freely like travel with my daughter, have all of the time, money, etc., freedom and flexibility to do those kinds of things. That might not be this like grandiose dream, right? I might not have 15 yachts and a farm and a house on the lake and like all these things, but like that is my unlimited type of life, is one where I can just pick up and go anywhere I want to go and have no worries in any regard in my life. And to me, that like Karyn said, doesn't have to be the entire universe. It's my little sliver of that goodness. And that is a huge part of my unlimited life.
Awesome. I love it. And what do y'all listen to when you want to feel unlimited?
Okay. I've got a song. Oh,
no, go for it. Go for it.
I do that all the time.
It's like, okay. Yeah.
A song that I really love is called Unstoppable by Sia. I love that song. It is so good. I used to listen to it a lot when I was running, but she says in there, like, I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. Like, I'm invincible. All of these things that just make you feel like you can literally do anything right now. And so when I listen to that song, I definitely feel it like charging up, you know?
Okay, for me, it's just Work Bitch by Britney Spears. Like, like I have this playlist I listen to and I'm on the elliptical. And it's like every time that comes on, I'm just like moving a little faster. Heart rate is going a little quicker, you know? So,
yeah. And where can listeners find you?
The best place to find us is on Instagram, probably. I'm at Hello Sam Munoz. Karyn is at Karyn Paige. Karyn with a Y, Paige with an I. That is her slogan, right? Your tagline.
Hey, it's a fact.
It is. The other place is makingwebsitemagic.com. That's where you can learn more about our podcast, see all of our stuff, and that'll take you everywhere you need to go. So those are our places.
Awesome. I will have links in the show notes. And for anyone listening who is interested in learning about starting a website business, Making Website Magic is the place to go, right?
Indeed it is.
Awesome.
Yes, it is.
Very cool. So definitely check that out if you're thinking that might be the career for you. And thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful to have this conversation.
Thank you, Valerie. This was really deep and thought-provoking, and I greatly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. I so appreciate you being here. If you got something out of today's episode, please share it. Leave me a review, take a screenshot, and post it on social with a shout out to me. Send it to a friend or, all of the above. Want to hang out more? Join me on Instagram. Or better yet, get on my mailing list to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And remember, your possibilities are as unlimited as you are. Allow yourself to shine, my friend. The world needs your light. See you next time.